Dear players, we continue to try new things here at Wargaming TV, while we develop video tutorials that will benefit as many players as possible. We've released some brief video guides in the past, but this time we've tried to take an exceptionally close look at the hero of today's video, the Soviet light tank T-52. This video guide is unusually long, but if you like it, we will make this kind of video more often in the future. Let's take a closer look at the characteristics of the T-52 and compare it to the other Tier 5 light tanks, the Chafia and the VK-2801. In comparison to these other tanks, the Soviet light tank has only 560 hit points, the lowest among the group. However, you will really notice this only in low-tier battles, where the VK-2801 can survive one more hit, maybe. In other words, the number of hit points on a light tank is not very important in high-tier battles. The weight of the T-52 is 15.5 tons. This is also the lowest among the Tier 5 light tanks. This is an advantage because the coefficient of engine power and weight of the T-52 is the best of the bunch. It gets 34.5 HPT, horsepower per ton, while the Chafia gets only 25 HPT and the VK-2801 has 26 HPT. The T-52 has among the best acceleration and maneuverability of any vehicle in World of Tanks due to its low weight. In addition, the maximum speed of this tank is 72 kilometers per hour. By the way, the T-52 can climb hills faster than any tank in the game. Despite the fact that the VK-2801 has the same top speed, the German light tank takes longer to reach it, and its maneuverability, especially at high speeds, is very poor. The Chafia has practically the same maneuverability as the T-52, but its top speed is only 56 kilometers per hour. The American light tank needs more time to reach this speed as well. This means there is no other tank in the game that can catch the T-52. Don't forget that it's also difficult to hit such a fast and maneuverable target. This is one of the best features, but not the only good feature of the T-52. The tank's low weight and high speed provides not only pros, but also some cons. For example, the Soviet light tank can't pivot in place like the VK-2801 and the Chafia can. It is also easy to damage this tank by ramming it due to its low weight. Heavy tanks can do about 300 damage, and if they reach their top speed, they might even destroy you. Now let's take a closer look at your armament. The best gun for the T-52 is the Zis-4, which is known as the Puncher. This gun has an impressive rate of fire. It is the fastest among the Tier 5 light tanks. It can fire about 21 rounds per minute, even without any modules or perks. And if you buy the medium caliber tank gun rammer and ventilation modules and your crew trains in the Brother in Arms perk, you will be able to shoot about 25.5 rounds per minute. In other words, you will be able to fire nearly every 2 seconds. The average damage for this gun is not very high though. This gun averages only 85 damage. It is the lowest among the Tier 5 light tanks. In comparison, the Chafia averages 115 damage, and the VK-2801 does around 110 damage. In theory, the T-52 is capable of inflicting about 1,700 damage and penetrating any tank in the game using regular AP ammunition. The truth is not so nice. You will do less damage, and your average penetration is not that great. The average penetration of the Zis-4 is 112 millimeters if you use ordinary armor-piercing ammunition and 189 millimeter if you use premium armor-piercing composite rigid shells. This is better than the Chafia's penetration, but lower than that of the VK-2801. This allows you to penetrate any Tier 5 tank from the front as well as Tier 7 self-propelled guns and medium tanks. You can penetrate the heavy tanks, TDs, and high-tier medium tanks only from the side or rear. You will probably have some trouble penetrating the Maus, the E-75, the E-100, and the IS-4. You will have to aim at their tiny weak spots to have any chance of penetrating these heavy tanks. The accuracy of the main gun is 0.34, the best among the Tier 5 light tanks. This is excellent. This makes it great for sniping. The aiming speed is only 2.3 seconds though. The other Tier 5 light tanks take 1.7 seconds to aim. This makes it harder for you to hit enemies at long range. Reloading takes less time than aiming, so you should wait until aiming is complete before firing again. In practice, you should not have difficulties firing from cover, because you will most likely be shooting the enemy while moving. The accuracy penalties for turning the turret or being shot at are not too bad. This is worse than the Chafia, but better than the VK2801 with the regular gun. Of course, if you perform sharp maneuvers while turning your turret 360 degrees, your aiming circle will be huge. You should pause and take careful aim to make your aiming circle smaller. Now let's talk about armor. This vehicle has 37 millimeters of armor on each side of the hull. The turret's frontal armor is 45 millimeters thick, but the side and rear armor is only 40 millimeter. The T-52 has some sharp angles, but this tank is not built like a flying saucer. The only spot with strong armor is of the mantelet around the main gun. The tracks can also save you from damage by taking all of the damage from a shell, especially if it's explosive. However, if a high explosive shell penetrates the T-52 anywhere else, well, you may have time for a quick prayer for your crew, because higher tier vehicles can easily penetrate your armor and do a lot of damage. Now we'll take a closer look at the view range of this tank. The view range of the T-52 is 300 to 70 meters. It is the lowest among the Tier 5 light tanks, but this isn't too bad because the tank is not meant to scout passively. If you want to have a longer view range, you should buy a binocular telescope or coated optics, and you'll be fine. You can spot a high-tier heavy tank at a range of 410 to 420 meters fairly easily with a good crew and modules. Compared to the maximum view range for the game, 445 meters, this is not bad at all. Don't forget about one more advantage of the T-52, its camouflage. Light tanks use their full camouflage factor even when moving. If you train your crew in camouflage skill, most Tier 10 heavy tanks will not spot a moving T-52 at ranges of 280 to 300 meters, and even a firing T-52 at range of 330 to 350 meters. The worst spotting is on the half-blind tanks like the IS-3. They can spot the T-52 only at ranges of 235 meters or less. Even the most attentive or with coated optics, improved ventilation, binocular telescope, recon, situational awareness, and brothers in arms can spot this fast light tank only at ranges of 355 meters or less. Other light and medium tanks can easily spot you right after you fire. If your opponents have these vehicles, you better be very attentive because they can spot you after you fire out to 445 meters. If your enemy doesn't have any of these tanks or you decide to go around a flank that doesn't have them, feel free to scout out the enemy tanks and stay invisible from them by holding your fire, since you can spot them at a range of around 400 meters, but they can spot you only at a range of 300 meters or less. Don't forget that bushes and trees can hide your enemies. You can drive across the entire battlefield and naively think that if you don't see the enemy, they can't see you. A sneaky enemy might be behind some bushes and radio your coordinates to his teammates. To avoid this, you should learn Sixth Sense to help predict enemy attacks. We can describe the general characteristics of the T-52 with a single sentence. This vehicle is quick and maneuverable. It is a nearly invisible scout with a very accurate gun, which also has a high rate of fire, good penetration potential, and practically magical armor. So let's move on to modules and crew skills. We strongly recommend that you buy improved ventilation, coated optics, or binocular telescope, and medium caliber tank gun rammer. Ventilation improves everything by raising your crew's skills. It provides some bonuses to your maneuverability and view range. It is very valuable. Coated optics provides additional view range, even when moving. What kind of scout are you if you haven't gotten coated optics? Binocular telescope can be useful instead if you plan to hide behind bushes and enjoy sniping your enemies. The medium caliber tank gun rammer is best for experienced and aggressive players. They tend to get bored standing in one place and often want to enjoy the action with the assault team. You should learn the following skills for your crew. First off, you should train your crew in camouflage skill. Your commander should learn Sixth Sense. Your gunner should study designated target. Your driver should train in clutch braking. And your loader should take safe stowage. Then you can train them all in Brothers in Arms, because this skill improves maneuverability and view range. The next skill for your commander is recon. While for your driver, it's off-road driving. And for the loader and gunner, they should be trained in repair skill. Why should you choose these perks? They emphasize the most important features of the tank, like quality of scouting and maneuverability. Repair skill is also useful, but it is not as important. If the enemy destroys your track, you can use a repair kit. But if they knock off your track a second time, you're toast. As for consumables, we highly recommend that you buy a small first aid kit, a small repair kit, and a removed speed governor. Nobody questions the first two items, but players always ask about the removed speed governor. The T-52 seems fast enough. What happens when our engine breaks? The answer is simple. The removed speed governor gives an extra 10% to the engine's power. The T-52 has much better acceleration and better maneuverability when its engines have more power. You will make the most important features of the T-52 even stronger. The engine will work for a long time, even with the removed speed governor. If you use this consumable properly, the engine will not break down during battle. Outfit your T-52 with the best gear, the most effective modules and consumables, and then jump into the battle. Once you get there, your tactics will depend on the map and your position. If you are a top-tier vehicle in the battle, you should understand that you cannot scout for the entire battle. If you are a top-tier vehicle, you are responsible for taking out the enemy tanks, which means you must fight. In this case, you should scout the enemy team just enough to find their main offensive thrust. Find a lone high-tier heavy tank and use the Korosil tactic against it. If there are no enemy heavy tanks around, you can search for a gap in the enemy lines. You can also try to destroy the self-propelled guns as well as the tank destroyers from behind. You should also help eliminate the enemy Tier 4 and Tier 5 light tanks. You'd better not lose sight of them at the beginning of the battle, or they may get to your artillery. You can catch any tank due to your high speed. Nevertheless, try to remember that the Chafia and the VK-2801 can destroy you in a one-on-one battle as easily as the French Tier 6 and Tier 7 light tanks. So if you are chasing them, you should make them turn their attention on you and just run away. If you do it right, you will give your self-propelled guns some time to change their positions, and your teammates time to shoot their scout. You can even ram other light tanks except the VK-2801. In the second part of the match, the battlefield will become more open as fewer tanks fight for victory, so you should look for more lone targets and destroy them. Don't forget that in close combat only the Tier 7 to Tier 9 medium tanks and the French Tier 8 heavy tanks will really cause you any trouble. These tanks have enough maneuverability and turret rotation speed to keep you in their reticles. They are also equipped with guns that average around 300 damage, which is a half of your HP. Their reloading speed is fast enough to shoot you in the back one more time as you run away. For other vehicles, you can use the Korosil against them, or you can just run away. If the Great Belarusian Random made you a low-tier vehicle in the match, which is quite common for scouts, you should scout for the whole battle. You will have to choose between active scouting and passive scouting. If you are an active scout, find a clear field with nice terrain around it and drive through it, spotting the enemy tanks for your self-propelled guns. You can drive up the central hill at Prohorovka, or to the hills at the 2D and 3D rows on Minovanka, or near the bunkers on the Siegfried Line. If you can't stay in the field anymore, you should find a good spot and spot enemy tanks from that position. You can play this way until half of the other team is dead. Don't forget that living longer helps your teammates. The T-52 is useful in the latter stages of the game as well. You can also be a passive scout. You will need the binocular telescope module to become a good passive scout. Your job in this role is very simple. Choose the thickest bushes as close to the enemy as possible. Then get to that position and enjoy watching your enemies being destroyed by your artillery. The most important thing is to get to that position without being seen. The most important thing is to stay alive throughout the battle, so you can spot the most targets for your team. When the Tier 9 and 10 monsters have all killed each other, and there are only a few enemies left, you should start hunting for their self-propelled guns. Find the best way to sneak up to the enemy's artillery and destroy it. If the opposition has no artillery or their teammates are defending the self-propelled guns, you should look for wounded enemy tanks and destroy them using the Carousel tactic. We will say this once more for emphasis: stay alive. What can you do if you can't get to their self-propelled guns? You can scout. What can you do if there is no lone wounded enemies? You can scout. The scout that attacks many enemies is a fool, and very quickly back in their garage picking another tank for a new battle. Don't forget to help your allies whenever possible. For example, if two IS-7s fight against each other, the T-52 can help their teammate by shooting into the enemy's rear. The enemy will definitely feel uncomfortable in this situation, with a giant Tier 10 heavy tank attacking him from one side and a tiny light tank doing damage from behind. You can also troll the enemy using this trick. Furthermore, if you have quite a bit of luck, you can even kill an enemy using this trick. However, you should be very attentive, because you can also be destroyed by another player while helping your friend. Of course, you should always choose the best route for scouting in any battle. Your primary mission at the beginning of every battle is to spot the maximum number of enemies and help your team choose the right flank for their attack. If you have the opportunity to spot their artillery, you should go for it, but be careful not to get killed. In the middle of the game, you should scout the enemies on the flanks, where your allies can't spot them. You should also assist your self-propelled guns, so they can shoot the enemy. There's no sense in spotting enemies when your teammates can easily spot them even without your help. You're better off patrolling the flanks, where they haven't got any visibility. Now for the maps. If you play on an open map, like Proharovka, Malinovka, or Fisherman's Bay, you should scout during the entire battle if possible. When you play on city maps like Ingst, Himmelsdorf, and Runeberg, you should start searching for optimal targets and look for ways to sneak up on the artillery. You should scout more often without taking part in close combat whenever you have a lot of self-propelled guns on your team. That doesn't mean that if your team hasn't gotten any self-propelled guns, that you should rush forward. Wait until some of your enemies are destroyed so you can sneak past them. Now we'll take a closer look at the most famous tactics of the T-52 in close combat. The T-52 is a quick tank in close combat, but you should fight like a medium tank, just faster and more aggressively. The first tactic is called attack on an angle. If you have to fight in close combat against an enemy who has already spotted you and who is aiming their gun at you, so you should drive straight at them. However, you should turn your vehicle somewhat to the left or right in order to go to a position from which you can perform Carousel tactic. Then you should change your direction just before the enemy fires. You can figure out if your enemy is going to shoot in one of two ways. The first way is to count the seconds since the last time he fired. The second way is easier, since most players just sit in one place when they shoot at you. This tactic helps them to aim better, so when you see that your enemy has stopped and is aiming at your tank, you should turn the other way. You will only waste time if you turn too early, and you will get shot if you are too late. You can only let the enemy shoot once before you get to him. The second tactic is commonly called Carousel. This tactic is both easy and hard at the same time. You have to drive around the enemy on the opposite side from its gun, staying behind the turret at all times. The T-52 can use this tactic against almost any tank in the game due to its high speed and maneuverability. This is simple, but there are some potential pitfalls in this tactic. When you use it, you should try to destroy the enemy's tracks to make it harder for him to turn toward you. You should also be careful that your opponent does not reverse his turret to try to catch you when you get to the opposite side. If you see that he is trying to do this, you should stop and turn around. Your agility allows you to turn just as well in reverse, so backing up is a great option. You must be a little ways out from the enemy's gun to be able to react in time. The third tactic is called teeter-totter. This tactic is even easier and also harder at the same time. When you see that the enemy's gun is almost aimed at you, you should reverse as quickly as possible. In most cases, your opponent will not be able to aim properly and obviously will miss, so you will be able to continue performing the Carousel against him. It is important to know when your opponent is about to fire at you. If you know he shot a second ago, there is no reason to reduce your speed by performing this tactic. Instead, you should continue to drive around his tank because you know that he is defenseless, because he can't shoot you yet. Try to remember these few pieces of advice. 1. These tactics are effective only in open areas where you have enough room to maneuver. 2. You shouldn't drive too close to the enemy because they can easily ram you. In the best case, you will be slowed down, and in the worst case, the enemy will destroy your track and you will be done for. 3. If your opponent is near some kind of barrier, you cannot use Carousel against him. You should just run away. The 4th tactic is called catch-up. If the enemy attacks you from a hill and there is no way you can run away, and there is also a barrier like a rock or a house that you can use for cover, you should use it to save your tank. You should get to the cover and start moving away from the enemy by driving around it. Be careful, because enemy reinforcements can arrive at any time. If your opponent is alone, he cannot catch your T-52, which will zip around the rock or house. Even another T-52 can't beat you, but can only match your speed. They will only catch you if you make a mistake, with the help of their artillery or the help of reinforcements. If you are one-on-one with your enemy, you can drive around this barricade until the match is over. When you make a more powerful enemy tank follow you, you can even make him expose himself to your artillery. And if you are the sole survivor on your team, you can even make the battle end in a draw. The 5th tactic is called thin trolling. This is my favorite tactic. If an opponent is shooting your ally or using Carousel against him, you first check for other nearby enemies, then get behind the enemy and start shooting into his weak spots. If you can't penetrate his armor, you should shoot his track or around his main gun. As soon as your opponent turns his attention and his gun on you, you should use the Carousel tactic to finish him off, or just hide behind some cover. As soon as the enemy turns his attention back to your teammate, you can come back out and start shooting. You should repeat this tactic until the enemy is dead. Be careful, because you can be destroyed by enemy artillery or tanks. It's hard not to laugh when an E-100 takes damage to the rear of its turret because it is too focused on an annoying scout, or when an IS-7 brews up after 3 or 4 of your shots in its rear. The most important thing is to ignore all flaming messages in the chat, or to turn the filter on so that you can keep your eye on the battle. Finally, the 6th tactic is called close contact. You can use this tactic against the turretless self-propelled guns and tank destroyers. This tactic is both easy and funny. Find a lone self-propelled gun and get very close to it. Sit side by side without any space between you. The self-propelled gun can't turn in either direction in this situation. It can only run away if it drives forward and then drives back using some kind of barrier, such as the corner of a building, a stone, or a red boundary line. When the self-propelled gun realizes it's had it, go ahead and destroy it. You can penetrate any self-propelled gun or tank destroyer using your gun. The stationary tank destroyer is an easy target for self-propelled guns. So if you see a target marker, you better drive off quickly. Otherwise, you could be hurt by splash damage from the explosion. In conclusion, we have some rules for you to follow if you want to be an excellent scout with the T-52. 1. Stay hidden and motionless only when you are acting as a passive scout, like at an intersection or choke point. 2. Don't attack. Use your maneuverability to move around opponents and obstacles. 3. Either stay very far away from enemy tanks or get right up next to them. 4. Always be scouting. Hide, use terrain to blend in, and keep looking for targets. 5. Stay away from obvious positions. Experienced players may already be targeting these spots for reconnaissance or artillery. 6. If you can't penetrate the armor, knock off their tracks and hit them right when they are about to shoot to throw them off. 7. Shoot into known weak spots whenever you have a chance. 8. Don't get trapped in dead ends or narrow spots where you can't maneuver. 9. Always try to be in the right place at the right time. 10. Keep an eye on the minimap and avoid tunnel vision on your target. 11. Do not die. Ever. That's all for now. See you next time.